This podcast is proudly sponsored by Gyro Drilling. They provide world-class drilling solutions for all types of projects. They specialise in auger, aircore and RC drilling. Head to the team at Gyro Drilling for all your mining needs and see how they can help you with your upcoming project. Hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. As this podcast grows, every subscriber helps. From those of you who watch this on YouTube or to those that listen on Spotify and Apple, every follower helps. If you do this one favour and hit follow on whatever platform you find us on, I promise I will continue to look and find fascinating people across the world and bring their perspectives to you. Thank you and enjoy this episode. So hello, I'm Ben Kostrich and this is the Market Bull Podcast. Joining me today in the show is Nicole Duncan, the Managing Director of NickelSearch, which is listed on the ASX under code NIS. They've had a fair bit of activity towards the back end of last year and I've got her in the studio today to talk all about it. So welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here.
We were saying this week there's RIU and you were there and there was a lot of investor activity and a lot of buzz, and of course this is in the small cap end of town, listed on the ASX, and we're saying potentially name changes on the card as we delve into the show. But for those that are unfamiliar with your background, you've worked at BHP and South32 and now in the small cap end of town at NickelSearch. I mean, what is your history and I guess interest in the mining sector and industry?
I've worked my whole career in mining. And like you said, BHP and South32 and fantastic companies to work for. Really great global experience, across a whole group of different types of jobs. But I got to the point where I wanted a role that was much more hands-on and much more a direct impact on, value creation for the shareholders. So I looked at the small cap part of town, and a junior explorer seemed like a really exciting place to be. So I knew a few people who were connected with NickelSearch, and I thought, yep, that's a great opportunity. I'll hopefully join them, and then they took me on, which was awesome.
And that was about 2 and a bit years ago that those conversations started?
Yeah. So the company listed in 2021 and late 2021, and so I started with them in February 2022. So it was just shortly after the listing.
Okay. And even taking on, you said the opportunity or even the excitement, the hands-on aspect, I mean, what were really some of the draw cards then that you were like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity and move away from, again, one of those multi-billion-dollar companies and go towards probably one that you've got a lot of a tighter expenditure on all the assets and everything you want to do, and you shrunk down in what you can and really can afford to do. So what was some of the real incentives for you to take on that challenge?
So I'd say that the same principles apply to running an exploration company as they do to, a large organisation. The same fundamental principles are in place. It's just the scale and the resources that you've got to do the work. So that's where my background actually came into, to shine, really, because I cover a whole bunch of functions. I worked a lot across the functions at BHP and South32. In this role, usually managing directors are geologists. So what I've had to ensure is that I've had a really good geological team, which I have. I've had the benefit of that. And then I can cover everything else, whether it's HR or finance or tech actually, in terms of finance, that's an area where it really pays to have someone else involved. So there's a level of independence and oversight that sits side by side with the managing director. But all the other functions, I had covered. And, in a small cap, there's no airbags. No. So in a large conglomerate, you've got lots of other functions that are checking your work, and there's, I'm there drafting ASX announcements and, signing off on the budgets and execution of the budget. There's no airbags, but that's what I signed up for.
Fascinating. And breaking down NickelSearch in itself, as we said, it's probably gone through a bit of a transition throughout its time and since you're at the helm. So for those that are unfamiliar with what the company is and I guess its mission and where, more importantly, its focus and the areas, I mean, what is the company? What is NickelSearch?
Yeah, it started off very much as the name says, so, exploring for nickel sulfides. The company's tenements sit at Ravensthorpe, which is on the way to Esperance from Perth. And so our neighbours are First Quantum. Now, they've just announced that they're really scaling back. That's a nickel laterite mine. We were searching for nickel sulfides, which are high-grade nickel. They're very, they're very much valued. Nickel laterite is a much more intensive nickel in terms of the amount you have to spend on processing, not so much for nickel sulfides. So we spent, the first 2 years after listing, really going full bore looking for the next RAV8. So on our tenement package, we have RAV8, which is an old nickel mine. It produced 16.1 kilotons, so that's 16,000 kilotons of nickel at 3.45%. So, a nice high-grade piece there. Yeah. So our whole focus was finding the next RAV8 or the next three RAV8s, because it's called a komatiitic nickel sulfide formation, and so they form in discrete pods. And their formation means that usually when you find one pod, you'll find another and another. So that was the whole premise.
Yeah.
But of course, the nickel market has really turned with the impact of nickel coming on from Indonesia. And we're seeing that in the headlines today. So only yesterday, BHP announced a massive scaling back of Nickel West. So, around about that, well, we were fortunate because in 2022, the company was then called Alchem. They run Mount Cattlin lithium production.
Yes.
They've now merged with another global organisation and they're known as Arcadium. But 2022, Mount Cattlin started flagging that they were running out of lithium from their open cut mine. So, in the background, we thought, hey, we're 10 Ks down the road by the highway from Mount Cattlin. They need feed. Otherwise, they have to do an underground mine, which is far more expensive.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So if we have any lithium prospectivity on our tenements, that might be of interest for them. And we thought that would be, not a side venture, but just another way of creating value for shareholders. And so, in 2022, we had a very well-known geochemist look at some soil samples that we had done on our tenements, just a small part of our tenement package. And he gave us 22 areas of interest to go into. So that's really how we got into lithium. And it just meant that when the market started, the sentiment in the nickel market started falling away, we were able to also ramp up the focus on lithium. So it set us up well.
Yeah, you covered a bit there because, the name would almost sort of insinuate that it's predominantly focused on nickel, and that's what we were sort of talking about before, that there will probably be some eventual name change to align itself. And I wanted to really talk about really both those commodities more from a macro point of view. The fact that lithium and nickel, the reality was their price points in 2020 was astronomically way too high for any sort of longevity. And we saw a pullback, but it's been quite harsh for a lot of the sector. And there's been a lot of restructuring, a lot of realignment as to what people are spending and the costs, because lithium at least has fallen 80%. However, it did run up well beyond that from where it started, and similar with nickel. But more so from that impact over the past couple of years, how has that really, what sort of impact has it had on groups like yourself on that smaller end of town? But more so, do you see that Australia is still quite in a unique position, especially in WA, to exercise really good lithium packages and opportunities that does set itself apart from the rest of the world? Like, nickel in Indonesia is a lot more cost effective at the moment, but eventually there'll be some sort of balance again. What are your thoughts there?
So there's a lot in that question, Ben. I'll take it in. I'll take it in chunks. Yeah. So let's focus on the nickel first. So yes, the market's been flooded by nickel coming out of Indonesia, and the big question mark is, how long will that last? Now, personally, I think that Indonesia's got enough supply to keep the market going for quite some time. So then the question becomes, will Australia ever be able to claw that back? Some market share. I think that will only come, unfortunately, if we have major environmental events that has a very big impact on people. Because what we're facing at the moment is there's a lot of talk about sustainably produced nickel and green nickel premiums, but it's far more cost effective to buy the nickel laterite coming out of Indonesia than it is to pay a premium for a sustainably sourced nickel product. So people are doing what they economically rationally should, and they're buying the cheaper product. But if you look at the last 5 years, say, when we have massive environmental events, then people start to think more longer term, not so much about immediate cost, but overall longer cost. That might be the time when a sustainably sourced nickel product, such as one coming out of Australia, might then be able to demand a premium for the product. So, but, we just, if that's going to happen, when that's going to happen, we just don't know. So the impact of what we're feeling at the moment is that, the retail investor or any investor really on the ASX isn't supporting nickel. And unless they're incredibly robust and counter-cyclical. But for the most part, all the funding on the ASX has dried up for any type of nickel, and certainly for any nickel exploration. And nickel sulfide exploration is expensive because, like I was saying before, these are discrete pods and they sit deep, so you can miss them when you're drilling. It's not like a huge iron ore body. You're looking for something that's, say, the size of a large house, 500 metres below surface with very little indication at surface that it's there.
Yeah.
So, there's just no sentiment for that type of exploration. That means there's no capital. That means that we can't fund our activities there, which means we're not going to have a pipeline of nickel projects when that sentiment comes back. So Australia's going to be a bit behind the 8 ball in terms of bringing on new nickel sulfide supply. So, I think that's where nickel's at, and I can talk a little bit about what we've done in response. But if I just turn more to lithium. So, with the whole electrification push, which is really ramped up, we saw it ramp up over COVID, and it's continued to ramp up. Lithium really, came to the fore with that, and certainly in the last 2 years, it's just been an amazing price rise. And there were companies like Pilbara Minerals, which were really set up for success to take advantage of that price rise. So that was great for them. I think what we're experiencing now is one of the first bumps in the road on that electrification journey, and it's primarily got to do with cost, which is what I just said. So, but with lithium, what's happened is there's a bit of uncertainty around, the purchase of electric vehicles is still happening, but it's just not happening at the rate that was predicted. So people are still transitioning to electric vehicles, but it's just not as steep as what everybody had
predicted.
Thought.
Yeah.
So, that meant that sentiment has come down and the price has fallen. But there's probably, number one, there was a bit of an overreaction in terms of the price hike, and now there's probably a bit of an overreaction in terms of the price low. So again, no one knows what's going to happen, but my best guess is that the price will recover somewhat. At the moment, the large lithium producers, if they get in the right spot on the cost curve, so they get the costs right down, they're probably still making a bit of a margin. It just wasn't what it was, say, 12 months ago.
Yeah.
So that's the global piece from my perspective, but I think Australia also benefited. So maybe the drop in price didn't have such a large impact on us as soon, as early as it did in the rest of the world last year, and that's because of the impact of the WA billionaires getting really interested in the lithium space. So probably Australia was a bit sheltered from the global lithium price coming off because there was such an interest in getting a footprint or a foothold on some of the hard rock lithium assets that are here. And, we all know those stories.
Yes.
So, and for some of them, that's still unfolding, as Europe being a great example. So, I think there's just been a bit of an overcorrection, and the price will recover somewhat.
Yeah, the markets have this fascination. It always happens where you overshoot to the upside and overshoot on the downside. And eventually there's this middle ground that's found. But your points about the electric vehicle uptake is pretty spot on in the fact that, these predictions and everyone likes to predict things well into the future, but we don't know until you actually get the raw data, and that always sort of rocks the boat. But there's no doubt that the lithium component for just batteries, but electric vehicles, but almost every technology that we use, there needs to be a continuous supply coming online, and that feeds itself into, yourself and the projects that you've got. And you alluded to more so the focus on the lithium and some of the other sort of realignments of what's happening. But can you talk to us a little bit about the projects that you've got and the activity that was happening in December with the 4 new tenements that you brought online as well?
Yep. So our history, as I said, is nickel exploration, but we've completely parked that at the moment. So we know the next 3 targets we want to drill, and then the next 3 targets after that, but there's no money for it. Yeah. So we've tied a bow on those, and when sentiment returns, we can quickly get on with that work. When we started life, we had 108 square kilometres of tenement. In December, we acquired additional tenements in the Ravensthorpe area, so that are pretty close to our current tenement package, which was great. And these were acquired for the lithium prospectivity. So now we're sitting on overall total package just shy of 200 square kilometres, 150 of which we have the lithium rights for. So there is a part of our tenement package that we only have the nickel rights for. So in terms of lithium, we have 150 square kilometres. But if I just back up, Mount Catlin flagging that they need more feed. We then looked at our soil sampling results. We realised that we were prospective for lithium. There was a really interesting high priority area for us that sat around a quarry. And so we thought, let's just go onto the quarry first and see what that looks like and see if we can see anything. And by this point, we had signed a non-disclosure agreement with Arcadium, with Mount Catlin. And so a couple of their geologists came with us when we went onto the quarry, and we walked on, and the quarries are used for road base in Ravensthorpe, and they have done blasting over previous years, and there's a number of stockpiles of rock sitting at surface. So when they get a job, they crush that rock. Anyway, there was a great big boulder of visual spodumene literally sitting in one of these stockpiles that the Mount Catlin geologists were able to point at and say, that's what you're looking for. That's what you want. And this is on our tenement package. The trick at that point was, though, that this was a beautiful, great big boulder, but we couldn't actually see any host rock from the quarry. And so all sensible geologists were going, this could have fallen off the back of the truck, right? So anyway, so we pushed over a number of the surface stockpiles, and my team looked at every single rock individually, and we found, quite a few more boulders that quite obviously had the host rock from the quarry and the visual spodumene. So the geologists were happy to sign it off. And so what we've now been doing since then is we've focused on the quarry, we've focused on the area around the quarry, and then we've focused on the broader land package. So would you like me to explain that?
200 kilometres square kilometres is not a small amount of land.
No, it's not. That's right. And you've got to prioritise it,
Exactly.
right? So our main priority is where we found the visual spodumene for obvious reasons. So the quarry has got a gravel sheeting on it that we need to pull up in order to expose the natural surface, in order to find where this visual spodumene or pegmatite is in that natural surface. So we're focused on doing that. Then around the quarry, we've done mapping and rock chip sampling and soil sampling. So that's all sensible work that any exploration company should do when you're looking to define drilling targets. And so we've done all of that work. So we've now announced that we have 8 drilling targets just in that quarry and surrounding area. And, we're looking to get a drill onto the tenement as quickly as we can. It's, as I said, in Ravensthorpe, which is a big farming community, and it's also privately held land as well as Crown land. And when you're working on privately held land, you need the owner and occupier consent to have access. Okay. So we're putting, we've got all the consents that we need. We just need one more, and we're in the hopefully final stages of getting that consent. So, and that person wants us to be there, wants to be involved in the work, is excited about the work. So that's great. We've just got to make sure that we put in the right place. Yeah. Right deal for them, right deal for us. So we're in the final stages of that. And once we can get that squared away and they're happy and we're happy, then we can start drilling, which will be great. So,
away we go. Very nice. Yeah, so then that means it's naturally going to be a very busy 12 months potentially if this all does sort of start unrolling quite quickly. And then, without, as we said, we don't want to predict too far into the future, but as you go through this drilling campaign, you've got those 8 targets. What else sort of starts coming after that, going through maybe your experience of what are the next steps after that?
Yeah. So in terms of those 8 drilling targets, some of them we would be able to drill immediately because, say, for example, on the quarry, it's already cleared. So you don't need any of the surveys that the department usually requires. Now, again, it's Ravensthorpe. They're known for their wildflowers. It does mean that there's requirements in terms of flora. There's also requirements in terms of fauna, so animals, and cultural heritage. So for some of those areas for drilling, we can go ahead because, we already have the clearances. But for some of those areas, we'll need to get those surveys done before we can drill. And that's okay because that then helps us stage the activity and stage the cost and, build up the knowledge base that would make the drilling more efficient going forward. And at the same time, what we're looking to do is to visit all of those areas of interest that we initially identified. So I said, that soil study was done over only a portion of our tenement package. We've then been able to do further work and we've identified 28 areas of interest. So we're now in the process of getting the team to all 28 areas, mapping, rock chip sampling, soil sampling. So that's the next program of work. And that's well underway. So, we should be coming out shortly, days or weeks with a new announcement about the regional work. And then beyond that is the rest of the tenement package plus the new tenements that we acquired. So, and again, that's going to be, the geologists have looked back at work that's historically been done and, and other sort of early indicators of potential lithium, outcropping pegmatites being one. And, plain English version is the pegmatite is what holds the lithium and outcropping means it comes to surface and exposes itself. Yeah. So, that's always a great place to start when you're trying to find, lithium. So we're going to focus on those areas first. But hopefully, the plan is by that point we know if there's no outcropping, how to look, what are the best signs for lithium that's been buried under surface. So, we'll be able to use all of that knowledge. So really, the areas are the quarry and the surrounds, then the other 28 areas, the remainder of those 28 areas, and then the broader package. And so we're going to be hitting all of those over the next 12 months.
That's a massive task. That's a fair bit of activity. And more so I always think about it like seasonality. Is there much of a seasonality component, particularly working in Ravensthorpe and around that area with, we talk about when you look at Pilbara, there's certain times of the year that are just, you can't be out there because of weather. Is there any sort of implications with that as well down there?
Yeah, there is. It tends to be more the wet season, which is winter. So usually during June, July, August, it's wet, and so the farmers don't want us on their property because that's going to have an impact on there if we're trying to get a drill rig on there. But usually then what we do is we plan to get as much work in the field done in leading up to June,
And then
and
in the
then we
labs.
use June, July, August to study all the data. Start announcing the results of that and the plans for when spring comes around in
The next
September,
set of-
October.
next
so
set of field work.
it is something that definitely has an impact, but we can manage that. The other impact is during the summer with forest fires, so we have to be very careful about that. But that's usually only, a couple of days here, a couple of days there. It's not like the wet weather.
Yeah.
But it's manageable so long as you plan for it.
Yeah. And you mentioned at the outset, I mean, you talked about the geos that you've had, but more so the team around you. And I mean, that palette of work there sounds like there is a lot to be aware of, and almost the whiteboard with notes and things to be on top of would be ever growing. But more so the people that are around you at NickelSearch. Talk to me a bit about their history and experience, and who else is around you and how they're helping with this mission.
Yeah, so starting with the board, we've got Mark Connolly and Linda Burnett as well as myself on the board. Mark's a very well experienced chair, and he has spent many years. He was an MD of a junior himself that went into development and production, Papillon. That was very successful. So he knows
his stuff.
He knows his stuff. Linda Burnett is a 30-plus year geologist, so very well experienced explorationist. In terms of the team, I've got the exploration team, and that is a combination of geologists and field assistants primarily, and then consultants when you need someone like a geochemist. The geologists have both nickel experience and lithium experience. I should also mention that our tenements are prospective for what's called VHMS. That's basically base metals. Oh, okay. So think of your copper and your lead and things like that. Yeah. But so we're prospective for that. But again, we're not pursuing any of that because we're using all of the capital that we have to pursue the lithium, given the context, right, with Mount Catlin just there. So, the geology team has got nickel experience, which we've now parked, but thankfully also had good lithium experience, plus also being able to collaborate with Mount Catlin. Their exploration manager is a 30-plus year lithium explorationist. So, that's a very good technical collaboration. Then we also have a very well-experienced fieldies. And so I've got a site operations manager and, field assistants, and they're doing a lot of the soil sampling, stream sediment sampling. They're walking the tenements and can identify outcropping pegmatites, so then the geologists can go back. So everything we're doing, we're trying to do it in a very cost-effective manner. And when you have very experienced field assistants, that helps a lot. And then there's, the rest of the team. So, the finance arm and the company secretary arm and the general database. I mean, a lot of value for us is in all the historical drilling and all the historical work that's been done on our tenement package. So that takes some effort to make sure that it's all
maintained and
That's
saved
exactly
correctly.
right.
Yes,
Yep. And it's not just the drilling database, but it's also, geologists who have worked in this area over the decades, making sure we've got all their reports and they're on a shared drive, So we're just trying to be really sensible about the value in us is in, a lot of this information. Yes. So making sure we have access to it. One thing I should point out is we have got about 140 kilometres of historical drilling that's been done on our tenements for nickel. And so part of what the team's also doing, and then we're getting to the final stages of this, is reviewing all of that drilling to see if pegmatites were logged or if a nickel geologist mistook something and incorrectly logged pegmatites for something else. So we're trying to be sensible about it. And, I only say that not because the geologists were incompetent, but
it was just no one really cared about lithium.
No one cared about lithium,
yeah.
That's right. So pegmatite was seen as a bit of a waste.
Exactly.
They'd be like, oh, whatever that is.
We're not looking for it.
So we've gone back and we've studied every metre of that 140 kilometres, and there is a world in which we either have historical core or historical pulps, so we can just reassay material rather than having to go and drill areas. But, that is something that we're able to do, is take advantage of that drilling database to help us get a bit of a leapfrog on the lithium side.
Yeah, the historical drilling was going to be one of the points to go down, and I think you've encapsulated quite nicely because, 20, 30, 40 years ago, some of the historical drilling goes back. No one really cared about lithium. They might have just been focused on gold or iron ore or something along those lines, and completely neglected it. And that's the beauty of having this historical data to go back and go, hey, it had no value 40 years ago, but all of a sudden now it's one of the only things that a lot of people want and in quite growing demand. But I mean, you've covered a lot of what you guys are looking to achieve, and I like to summarize really the key 3 takeaways so that investors know that really everyone loves it in threes, but 3 key points that they can take away knowing that NickelSearch will be focusing on this year, or the key points that they should remember about this discussion today.
Yeah, so first point is that we're in a slightly different economic context than other lithium explorers, which is, we're 10 kilometres, literally 10 kilometres on the highway from Mount Catlin. They're running out of feed, so anything on our tenements, we would only need to cover the cost of digging it out of the ground and trucking it 10 kilometres down the road to them. So we're in a different economic context. For the next 12 months, as I've outlined, we've got a very busy exploration program. So that means lots of news flow and lots of interesting things to disclose to the market. So should keep eyes on the story. And just in the final point, we will be looking at changing the name. It will be something that we address. But say at RIU, just recently I had to put over our name a handwritten note saying lithium found. Yeah. Because what I saw was people walking past going, oh, nickel,
out of favour.
Yeah, but I had a big stonking rock of visual spodumene on the desk, and then I stuck a paper over saying, lithium found, and that got more attention. So, I would say, keep your eyes on us, because we've got a great economic context and we've got a great exploration program, and we're well funded to deliver that. We had 3.5 million in the bank at the end of December, so we can deliver this exploration plan.
Yeah, I think the infrastructure in the surrounding area is important, and saying that a feed is a mill is going and running low on feed means that really the closest thing is what you want, and that'd be a perfect synergy that could really unfold quite excitingly to this year. But for those that are interested in following and keeping up to date with NickelSearch, or the impending new name that comes across, where can they go, and how can they potentially reach out to yourself or have conversations and find out more information?
Absolutely. So on our website which is nickelsearch.com, you can sign up for a mailing list. There's a subscribe button there. And there's also an information email address, and that's very actively monitored. And often I'm the one coming back directly and providing a response to any questions, which I'm absolutely more than happy to do. I mean, investors or potential investors are owners of the business. Yeah. And so, if they have any questions, then it's part of my job to address those as best I can. So, it's a lot of information on our website.
Oh, fantastic. No, I appreciate you taking the time and speaking to me today. And it's, again, I always love uncovering these companies and finding out what's going on in different areas across WA. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me on the show today.
Thanks, Ben. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow The Market Bull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.